Feeling lucky. Hi, I'm Ian Roofe and welcome to Get Gardening, and in this video we're looking at roses. Wonderful roses that we can get more of for our gardens. Now, as we know, roses are such wonderful garden plants. They're a plant which is associated with the quintessential English garden, either as shrub roses like this, or tumbling over walls or fences and billowing away with their beautiful flowers. And they're plants which, in the gardens here at East Ruston, they grow particularly well because we've got a quite sort of heavyish, loamy-ish soil in parts. Although it does drain well, it's got lots of nutrients in that the roses need. But you'll find anyway they're actually very good garden plants. Now, they're available from garden centres and nurseries at this time of year as bare root plants, and that's one of the ways that you can actually get more. But if you want to, you can also have a go at creating more roses yourself at home. And there are a couple of ways in which we can do it. Now, this variety here is Lucky, and it was Rose of the Year, I think, about sort of 4 or 5 years ago. It's a lovely floribunda type rose, beautiful sprays of multi-flowers there. You can see its buds. Beautiful rich cerise pink opening up to a sort of paler pink there, but really, really good. And it will also have a slight scent to it during the summer. But here we are late in the year, not far off Christmas, and it's flowering brilliantly. Now, there are a number of ways we could get this rose. We could get some hips, and roses will produce hips late in the season. And these have been cross-pollinated by bees and other insects. Now, the only downside to using hips is that we won't get this true Lucky rose. We can sow them and we will get lots of roses from there, and we'll get lots of different varieties, we'll get lots of crosses, we'll get lots of interesting things. So it's a way of getting new plants, but not always the one you want. But the joy about sowing seed is that you never quite know what you're going to get, and you can get some really unusual, quirky things. The other way we can propagate is vegetatively, and that's by actually taking cuttings. And one of the best sort of methods of cuttings to use are hardwoods. Now, they're not the quickest way of getting new roses, but they are one of the most inexpensive, and they are one of the most easiest and successful. And as you'll see from this plant here beside me, this plant of Lucky, there is plenty of material on there which we can use to take hardwood cuttings from our roses. And once I've got my secateurs, I'm going to show you what to do. So I'll put these down. Now, what we ideally want are these long shoots, and you can see that Lucky has done that this year. It's put on long shoots. In fact, a lot of the roses have put on long shoots this year, lots of whippy, watery shoots once they finish flowering. But this means we've got great material. Now, coming closer and have a look. It's important that we remove the material from the plant properly, and we always make sure that we cut above a node. Okay, you see that? So we've just cut just above the node, and the node is where the leaves come from. And also in here, if I pull that leaf off there, you'll see in there, very tiny, there's a tiny embryonic bud in there. And at some point in the not too distant future, ideally next spring, that will also produce us a new shoot, okay? So cutting to nodes are really important. The other thing is that if we cut to the node, the plant will naturally produce a seal in that stem. It will naturally produce a layer of cells which will stop any infection getting into the plant. If we cut above, we need to leave a section of stem. What will happen is that section of stem will die off back to the node, and it could kill the node and the bud off. So it's really important that we remove the section from the plant properly. Now, we've also got this material, so we want to aim for our hardwood cuttings to be about 1 foot in length, and about the thickness of a pencil is ideal. These are slightly thicker, but that's not going to matter. Now, you'll see from when removing it from the plant, we made a cut above a node, and in order to make it into a cutting, we're going to make a cut below a node, okay? You'll see there, if I take that leaf off, you'll see we've got a little node there. And the reason we cut below the node to turn it into a cutting is because at that point there, in that little node, there are all the hormones which we need in order for this piece of plant material here to callus over and to produce roots. And it will turn this stick into a new plant, okay? So once we've made our cut at the bottom of the node, we then need to work about 30 centimetres up, and we want to make a cut above a node. So I'm just going to turn that round, and you'll come in here and have a look, and you'll see there I'm going to make a cut above. Okay, and once again I've made that cut above a node for the same reason on the plant, to stop it dying back. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to strip these leaves off, because if we leave the leaves on they will actually rot. Let's pull them off there, and the plant doesn't really need them this time of year, the cutting doesn't either. Okay, but we'll leave the thorns on because that's absolutely fine. Now what we're going to do with this cutting then is we can either put it in the ground, if you've got somewhere in the garden which you may have like a little nursery bed. Now a nursery bed is an ideal thing to have in the garden. You don't have to have a large garden to do it with. If you've just got a small area down bottom by the veg garden or by the greenhouse, then a nursery bed is an area where we've improved the soil with some homemade compost or some leaf mould or something, and we've put in some sharp sand if our soil is particularly heavy, and it just makes what we call a friable, a nice open mixture of soil for us to line out these cuttings to ensure that their root systems get away successfully and get away with a good start. Now with this cutting now, we're then going to put it either in the garden or in a pot, but the important thing is we're going to plunge it into the pot or the garden to that depth. So where my fingers are, that will be either compost level or soil level, and it's important that the largest amount of the cutting is underground, because even though there's no leaves on this material, this actual cutting will still try and lose water. Okay, the moisture will still try and evaporate from the stems, so the more of it is underground, the less we've got to evaporate, and also we've got many more nodes under the soil, which is where we will get roots from. Okay, now in the spring we will see signs of this rose doing something. We should get the top two buds start to swell slightly, and we'll get some, hopefully get some leaf growth off there. And then this time next year, so it's 12 months time, so November or December next year, we'll be able to lift the plant up and we should have a good root system on it, and it'll be an ideal time to move it. Now once that plant has been lifted, we can then either put it into a container if it's been in the garden, you know, in the nursery bed, and we can grow it on a bit longer, and then find an ideal place to plant it out in the garden. So it's not the quickest way to get new roses, but it is one of the ways in which we can get this rose lucky to have new plants of it again, because it's genetically the same. And it's also an easy method. You know, it's one of the easiest things, hardwood cuttings, because really you just put them in the ground or you put them in a pot in a cold greenhouse or a cold frame, and you know, apart from watering them through the driest parts of the year, you really much leave them to it, leave them to do their own thing. And commercially they don't tend to use this method for roses, they tend to graft them, but roses don't need to always be grafted. The reason they are grafted is because it gives you a quicker plant for sale, and when you're running a business, when you're running a nursery, you want to get as bushy a plant as possible. But for you as a home gardener and for me, our roses will grow equally as well if they are on their own roots, and this will have its own roots and away it will go. So a brilliant way to get plants for free and to have more roses to give flowers and interest in your summer garden. And, oh bugger, what happened there? See, so I start again. Oh, he's gone, oh he's gone. Oh, he's down here, look, hello. I love the robins, they're just the most amazing little birds. We've had them with us all morning.